Imagine, right, that you live in a house, but this house is built directly on a bridge.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
And this bridge connects two massive, heavily armed, just fiercely antagonistic cities. Like, they hate each other.
Right, a real powder keg situation.
Exactly. And for years, you've prided yourself on not taking a side. You know, you don't fly the flag of the city to the east. You don't wear the colors of the city to the west.
So you're just doing your own thing.
Yeah, you consider yourself neutral, objective. You're safely removed from all their constant yelling and squabbling. But then one day, the drums start beating.
Oh boy.
The armies start to march, and you suddenly realize this terrifying truth, which is that your house isn't a sanctuary at all.
No, it's the road.
It is the very first piece of territory that both of those armies are going to march over, occupy, or just burn to the ground. You aren't watching the war, you are the battlefield.
That is such a visceral image, and it perfectly captures the precise mechanical reality of our political landscape today.
Doesn't it? Because I feel like we always harbor this persistent, almost romanticized vision of the political center.
Right, the quiet valley between two warring mountaintops.
Yes, exactly. A place where, rational people retreat to just escape the noise of the fringes. But what we're going to see today is that the structural reality is totally different. The middle is actually the most violently contested real estate on the map.
It really is.
Which brings us to our deep dive today. We are pulling apart this brilliant piece of analysis titled The Violent Volatility of the Political Center.
It's a fascinating text.
It's incredible. And if you're listening right now, I want to ask you a question. Where do you picture yourself on the political spectrum? If you consider yourself somewhere in the middle, do you view that space as a safe haven? Because our mission today is to understand why that traditional view of the safe middle ground is, frankly, a complete myth.
A total fabrication, yeah.
We're going to look at why the political center is actually the most dangerous, volatile, and structurally hostile place you could possibly exist.
And what makes this specific analysis so penetrating, I think, is that it completely discards the standard political science vocabulary.
Right, no jargon.
Exactly. Instead, it relies on physical geography and atmospheric physics to demonstrate how pressure works.
Which is so cool.
It really is. It takes these invisible political forces and maps them onto very visible, tangible realities on Earth. So you can actually see the mechanics of what's happening.
So let's jump into section 1. The analysis starts by going after what it calls the illusion of intellectual balance.
Oh, this is a big one.
Right. Because we all know the appeal here. The middle ground presents itself as this, serene vantage point. You get to play the role of the objective judge.
Right, sitting on the bench.
Sitting calmly, weighing the evidence from the left and the right, and you don't ever have to get your hands dirty in the partisan trench warfare.
The appeal is obvious.
Right.
Because it implies a level of intellectual elevation.
Oh, totally. Like you're above it all.
Exactly. If you are in the middle, the assumption is that you've transcended the tribalism that infects everybody else. You are evaluating ideas strictly on their merit.
But the text is pretty brutal about this.
It is, because the fundamental error in that assumption is the belief that the environment will even allow you to remain a passive observer.
Right.
The center isn't a viewing deck. It's actually a site of rigorous transformation and just unrelenting pressure.
The phrase that jumped out at me from the text was absorbing fire from every direction.
Yeah, that's a powerful way to phrase it.
It really forces you to realize that refusing to align with a faction doesn't make you invisible to them.
No, it makes you an obstacle.
It's like, okay, imagine you're the referee in a heavyweight wrestling match.
Okay.
And you're wearing the stripes, you're trying to enforce the rules, but suddenly you realize both fighters have decided to team up and just body slam the ref instead.
That is exactly what it feels like.
Right. You aren't watching the fight, you are the target.
And to understand why that happens, why the ref gets body slammed, we have to look at the function of diagnosing errors in a highly polarized environment.
Okay, unpack that a bit.
So if you operate in the true center, your political process basically involves looking at the left and pointing out where their logic fails.
Right.
And then turning to the right and doing the exact same thing. You are constantly critiquing the entire ideological spectrum.
But wait, I have to push back here because shouldn't that be the ultimate goal of a healthy democratic process?
You think so, yeah.
Like if a voter is pointing out the genuine flaws in, say, progressive rent control policies, and then also pointing out the genuine flaws in conservative tariff proposals, aren't they elevating the conversation?
Ideally, yes.
So why does diagnosing those errors make them a target instead of, a valued voice of reason?
Well, that assumes the primary goal of our political infrastructure is finding the most effective policy.
Oh,
And it's not. It absolutely isn't. The primary operational goal of any partisan faction is establishing and maintaining tribal cohesion.
wow. Group solidarity.
Group solidarity is the currency of political power. So, when a centrist offers a nuanced critique, the partisan doesn't hear a helpful policy adjustment.
What do they hear?
They hear an existential threat to group loyalty. Critique is processed directly as hostility.
So by refusing to just, blindly validate either side, you are essentially making allies of no one.
You become a universal antagonist. If you are not entirely inside the protective cover of a partisan trench, you are perceived as an enemy by everyone who is.
You're absorbing fire precisely because you refuse to wear a uniform.
Exactly.
And this moves beyond just the interpersonal psychology of voters. The text gets into the actual architecture of the system, which is terrifying.
Oh, the structural stuff is where it gets really bleak.
Yeah. Because the framework of our democracy, while theoretically built for the citizenry, has been heavily engineered by the two dominant factions.
Engineered to protect their duopoly, specifically.
Right. And the analysis points out that gaining meaningful access to contest these entrenched structures isn't just difficult for an independent. It uses a very specific word. It calls it prohibitive.
And prohibitive is the operative word there.
Yeah. Why that word?
Because it means the friction is intentional design to prevent entry. It's not an accident.
Give me an example of that.
Okay, consider the physical mechanics of ballot access in the United States.
Like just getting your name on the paper.
Exactly. In many jurisdictions, the two major parties have codified rules that guarantee their candidates automatic placement on the ballot.
Just boom, you're there.
Right. But an independent or a third-party candidate, they might have to organize this massive ground game to collect tens of thousands of verified physical signatures
Oh, wow.
just to get their name printed on the exact same piece of paper.
That is a massive expenditure of time and capital before the actual campaigning even begins.
He really is.
It's like an arbitrary toll booth that's placed exclusively on the road the independent has to drive.
And those toll booths are literally everywhere.
Like where else?
Well, think about committee assignments in legislatures. They're entirely controlled by party leadership
Oh, right.
or campaign finance architecture, like the major digital fundraising platforms. They are explicitly partisan conduits.
You can't just plug into them if you're unaffiliated.
Exactly. Even debate stages are gated by polling thresholds that require a level of national name recognition that really only a major party apparatus can manufacture.
So the entire system is just engineered to process and reward partisan behavior.
That's the bottom line. If you operate outside that binary, the machinery physically cannot process you.
Okay, but this raises a massive contradiction for me.
What's up?
If the system is this hostile, if the structures actively repel anyone not wearing a team jersey, why do we constantly see polling data suggesting that 40% or more of the electorate identifies as independent?
Ah, yes. The 40% myth.
Right. You look at those numbers and you would think the center is this massive unified voting bloc that could just take over at any minute.
Well, the data is highly deceptive. And the analysis makes a crucial distinction here between genuine ideological neutrality and what is essentially just a branding choice.
A branding choice.
Yeah. A vast majority of the people who tell pollsters they're independent are what political scientists call closet partisans.
Oh, interesting. So they wear the independent label because it sounds, sophisticated.
Exactly. It sounds intellectual.
Yeah.
But then they go and pull the lever for the exact same party in every single election.
Right. They want the aesthetic of free-thinking detachment without the actual friction of ideological inconsistency.
They are highly predictable voters in practice.
So they aren't the real center.
No. The true focus of this analysis, the person really taking the hits, is the genuine independent.
Okay, let's define them.
This is the voter who utterly refuses a prepackaged partisan identity, and they insist on evaluating politics on a strict issue-by-issue basis.
And the profile of this voter is fascinating because this is someone who might hold deeply conservative convictions on, say, corporate taxation and military spending,
Right.
but then simultaneously hold fiercely progressive convictions on environmental protection and labor rights.
Exactly.
They are building a political worldview a la carte, just picking and choosing based on the issue.
Which is the very definition of a genuinely mixed ideological profile. It's a bottom-up, construction of political philosophy rather than a top-down acceptance of whatever the party platform hands you.
Okay, I have to challenge this, though, because if someone is building their worldview a la carte, mixing and matching policies from completely opposite ends of the spectrum, doesn't that just make them politically incoherent?
That is exactly how the partisan infrastructure views them.
Right, because how do we know this genuine independent isn't just a confused voter with no underlying core philosophy?
Well, they view them as incoherent or politically illiterate, but that viewpoint assumes that the pre-packaged party platforms are inherently coherent.
Oh, and they aren't.
History shows us they absolutely are not. Party platforms are constantly shifting coalitions of convenience.
That's a good point. What was considered conservative 20 years ago might be rejected by the right today.
Exactly. So the genuine independent isn't lacking a core philosophy. Their core philosophy is simply the process of individualized reasoning rather than tribal conformity.
But that individualized reasoning has to be a nightmare for a political strategist.
It is an absolute algorithmic nightmare
I bet.
because institutions require predictability and scale to function efficiently.
Right.
A political campaign needs to know that if they run a specific message on healthcare, a specific demographic will turn out and vote for their entire slate of candidates.
They need those reliable models.
Exactly. And the issue-by-issue thinker completely breaks that predictive model.
Yeah.
You cannot assume their stance on foreign policy based on their stance on public education.
They are essentially unmodelable.
Completely unmodelable.
And because they can't be modeled, they can't be efficiently manipulated or modalized.
Therefore, the infrastructure is literally designed to ignore them. But, that comes at a really heavy cost to the voter themselves.
How so?
Well, the analysis notes that these genuine independents obviously lack the institutional support of a party, which we've discussed.
Yeah.
But they also lack something else, the social comfort of a tribe.
That is so true. We deeply underestimate how much of modern politics is just a search for community.
It's huge.
It's about a shared vocabulary, a shared set of enemies. It's the psychological safety of knowing you belong to a group that has your back.
Right, you're on a team.
But the genuine independent willingly amputates that social support.
They do. They isolate themselves in what the text beautifully describes as a volatile intersection where competing ideas collide, get stress-tested, and either harden or shatter.
That phrase, harden or shatter, it completely changes the definition of the middle for me.
How so?
Well, we're conditioned to think of the political center as a place of compromise, right? A negotiation table where the left gives 20%, the right gives 20%, and we land on this soft, watered-down consensus.
But compromise implies blending. And harden or shatter implies a forge.
A forge, yeah.
When an issue-by-issue independent is holding a progressive idea and a conservative idea simultaneously, those ideas aren't gently mixing together.
No, they are being forcefully struck against each other in the mind of the voter.
Exactly. And if an idea relies on weak logic or just tribal talking points, it shatters under the pressure of that opposing scrutiny.
But if it survives that collision...
If it survives, it hardens. It becomes a deeply resilient conviction.
But that stress testing is rigorous. I mean, it sounds like an incredibly violent and exhausting environment to inhabit mentally.
It is. And to make this abstract concept of a volatile intersection tangible, the analysis actually shifts away from political theory entirely right here.
I loved this part.
It asks us to look at how the Earth itself processes transitional zones.
The assertion here is that transitional zones in nature are never passive.
Never.
The most consequential and dangerous environments on the planet are the crossroads where massive forces meet and overwhelm each other.
So we begin with maritime choke points.
Yeah.
The physical fluid dynamics of the oceans.
The Drake Passage is the prime example in the text.
Oh, this is a great one.
For anyone listening who hasn't, visualized the globe recently, this is the relatively narrow stretch of water between the southern tip of South America, Cape Horn, and the South Shetland Islands of Antarctica.
Right at the bottom of the world.
Right. It is the connective tissue where the Atlantic Ocean and the Pacific Ocean converge, and it is universally recognized by sailors as among the most treacherous, terrifying stretches of navigable water on Earth.
The analysis also points to the Cape of Good Hope at the southern tip of Africa, where the Atlantic meets the Indian Ocean.
Another crazy spot.
A place so violent its original colonial name was actually the Cape of Storms.
And what's crucial to understand about these waters is that the lethal danger doesn't originate from just one ocean.
Right.
Like, if you are sailing in the deep, open Pacific, you will obviously encounter massive swells and severe weather.
Sure, it's the ocean.
But you are dealing with a unified system. The
Yeah.
current is pushing in one general direction. The kinetic energy sort of makes sense.
The danger at the Drake Passage is the collision itself.
Right.
You have the staggering volumetric mass of the Pacific Ocean ramming directly into the opposing mass of the Atlantic Ocean.
Two oceans fighting for the same space.
Exactly. You are dealing with competing thermohaline circulations. Massive differences in water temperature, salinity, and density, all trying to occupy the exact same space at the exact same time.
It makes me think of an experiment you can do with two incredibly powerful neodymium magnets.
Okay.
Have you ever done this? If you hold them with the identical poles facing each other, so the magnetic fields actively repel.
Right, they don't want to touch.
Right. And you use your physical strength to force them together anyway. As they get closer, your hands start to violently shake.
Because the resistance becomes kinetic.
Exactly. The space between those two magnets isn't a peaceful, neutral buffer. It is a microscopic pocket of pure, vibrating instability. It is contained chaos.
That's a great analogy.
If you could shrink yourself down and stand in the millimeter of space between those repelling magnets, you would be torn apart by the opposing forces. And that shaky, violent space, that is the Drake Passage.
It's a phenomenal way to visualize the political independent, because the independent is standing in that vibrating gap.
Wow, yeah.
The immense pressure they experience isn't generated by their own internal contradictions. It is the external shearing force of two massive, opposing ideological oceans crashing into each other directly on top of them.
And the geography of violence doesn't stop at the oceans either. The analysis moves to the continents next, specifically looking at the Middle East.
Yes, and it frames the region not just as a place, but as a function.
A function, like the connective tissue between Europe, Asia, and Africa.
Exactly. It is the ultimate civilizational crossroads. Historically, it's the intersection of the world's most lucrative trade routes, the birthplace of dominant religious traditions, and the overlapping boundary of just countless imperial ambitions.
And the common assumption is that being the bridge, being the essential connective tissue, should grant you a protected status.
Like a safe zone.
Right, like the mediator is supposed to be safe. But the historical reality of the Middle East proves the exact opposite. Being the center has made it the most continuously contested, violently fought over geography in the history of human civilization.
From the Romans to the Mongols to the Ottomans to modern superpowers, the bridge is never respected as a neutral zone.
No.
The bridge is the ultimate strategic prize. And the analysis delivers a line here that serves as the thesis for this entire geographic metaphor. It says, being at the center of everything means absorbing the pressure of everything.
That just reframes the entire concept of neutrality for me. Because if you are on the extreme periphery, say an isolated island somewhere, you might be ignored entirely by the global powers.
Out of sight, out of mind.
Right. You have the luxury of peace strictly because you are irrelevant. But if you are in the center, every migrating population, every army, every economic network has to pass through you.
Centrality guarantees continuous contestation. You cannot remain isolated or unaffected when you are the literal thoroughfare for every competing force in the system. The geographic center is a permanent target.
Okay, so we have the oceans, we have the continents. But there is a final geographic metaphor in the text that perfectly encapsulates the specific type of volatility we see in modern politics.
Oh, the meteorological one?
Yes,
Yeah.
It's the climate itself.
This is perhaps the most instructive parallel in the entire analysis. Tornado Alley in the central United States.
So if you look at the North American continent, the Central Plains sit directly between two massive extreme climate engines.
Right.
To the north, you have the Arctic conditions of Canada pushing these massive systems of dense, dry, freezing air southward.
And then to the south, you have the Gulf of Mexico pushing vast systems of warm, heavily moisturized air northward.
And the Central Plains are the geographic middle. Now, if we apply the traditional moderate middle theory of politics to the weather, we would assume that when that cold air and warm air meet in the middle, they simply blend.
Right.
They'd create a pleasant room temperature equilibrium.
Yeah, you mix hot and cold, you get lukewarm.
It sounds so logical, but any meteorologist will tell you that is the exact opposite of what actually happens in the boundary layer.
Absolutely. The collision of those extreme air masses doesn't create equilibrium at all. It creates the most violent rotational storm systems on the planet.
Because of the friction.
Exactly. The friction of the cold, dense air violently scraping over the warm, buoyant air creates severe wind shear. And that shear forces the atmosphere to begin rotating horizontally, which massive updrafts then tilt vertically. The result is a vortex capable of tearing cities apart from their foundations.
And the crucial detail the analysis emphasizes is where that vortex forms.
This is key.
You do not see massive F5 tornadoes forming deep inside the stable extreme cold of the Canadian Arctic.
Yeah.
And you don't see them forming in the stable extreme warmth over the Gulf of Mexico either.
The extremes themselves are actually relatively static, stable environments.
The tornado forms precisely at the point of intersection.
Right in the middle.
Let's map this directly onto the political landscape, because this is where my mind was blown.
It tracks so perfectly.
It does. The cold air pushing from the north represents one entrenched political extreme. Let's say the rigid ideological purity of the far left.
Okay.
The warm air pushing from the south represents the other extreme, the rigid ideological purity of the far right.
Now, if you are an operative living deep inside one of those ideological extremes, your environment feels perfectly stable.
Right. It's calm.
The rules are clear. The enemies are defined. Your peer group completely agrees with you, and your media diet reinforces your exact worldview every single day.
You are not experiencing atmospheric turbulence.
Not at all. But the genuine independent voter is standing in Tornado Alley.
They are existing in the exact boundary layer where these opposing worldviews are colliding.
Yes. And just like the air masses, the political pressures do not cancel each other out to create a calm, moderate consensus. They create a destructive vortex.
The rotational energy of our current political discourse, like the outrage, the rapid polarization, the constant shifting of cultural battle lines, all of that is generated by the friction of these extremes scraping against each other in the center.
That's exactly it. And we really have to look at the human toll of this.
The voter standing in Tornado Alley.
Right. Because how does a person navigate an environment designed to tear them apart?
It seems impossible.
The analysis transitions here into what it calls the structural trap. It breaks down the specific mechanisms of why the system fundamentally hates the center.
Okay, let's get into the mechanics of that.
It starts with how the dominant factions actually view the independent voter.
Right, we touched on this earlier. The major parties do not look at the independent as a principled thinker navigating a complex storm.
No, not at all. They categorize them in one of two ways. Either as a highly persuadable target to be manipulated.
Like a blank slate.
Exactly. Or as a hypocritical obstacle to be dismissed entirely.
The analysis points out that these voters refuse to be, quote, flattened into a platform.
Right.
If you tell a partisan operative that you support strict border enforcement, but you also demand aggressive, federally funded climate change intervention, they don't respect your nuance.
They absolutely don't.
They assume you either haven't made up your mind yet or you are deeply inconsistent.
And inconsistent is the polite term they use.
What's the impolite term?
Moral cowardice. More often than not, the independent is accused of being a moral coward.
Wow.
Because political platforms are now inextricably linked to moral identity, right?
Good versus evil.
Exactly. So failing to adopt the entire platform is viewed as a moral failure. The partisan cannot comprehend that the independent's loyalty isn't to a prepackaged moral framework, but to their own rigorous process of evaluating each distinct issue.
And to ensure that the center remains uninhabitable for these people, the system relies on three specific pillars of hostility.
These are essential for understanding the mechanics of our current paralysis.
Let's break them down. The first pillar is the media ecosystem.
Right. The analysis states that the media ecosystem is built entirely around partisan identity, which basically leaves no durable home for the independent.
And to understand why, we have to look at the economics of modern attention.
It's all about the money.
Exactly. Because in the era of broadcast television, right, or like widely circulated local newspapers, the economic incentive was to capture the broadest possible audience.
You wanted everyone tuning in.
Right. And that meant programming for the center. You didn't want to alienate the edges, but your anchor was definitively the middle.
But that economic model is entirely dead now.
Completely gone.
In the era of narrowcasting and algorithmic distribution, the economic incentive is deep, persistent engagement.
Yes.
And the most efficient drivers of engagement are fear, outrage, and in-group validation.
The algorithm quickly learns that, like, a nuanced breakdown of trade policy yields extremely low engagement.
Nobody clicks on that.
Right. While a hyperbolic attack on a political outgroup yields massive, instantaneous engagement.
So the media ecosystem monetizes the extremes. It is economically irrational for a major media platform to cater to the center.
Therefore, the independent voter opens their feed or turns on the television and finds absolutely nothing that reflects their complex, issue-by-issue worldview.
Nothing at all.
They are structurally homeless in the information space.
Which brings us to the second and perhaps most structurally devastating pillar.
The primary system.
Yes, the primary system. The analysis points out that the mechanisms determining who actually appears on general election ballots are dominated by the very factions most hostile to centrist reasoning.
The history of the primary system is fascinating here, actually.
It really is.
Because we transitioned to primary elections as a way to take power away from party bosses.
Right. Smoke-filled rooms.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We wanted to give the power to the voters. But the unintended consequence of closed and semi-closed primaries has been completely catastrophic for the political center.
In a closed primary, only registered members of the party can participate.
Right.
And because primary elections occur on random Tuesdays, often months before the actual general election, turnout is notoriously low.
So who actually shows up?
The only people who show up to vote are the most highly motivated, hyper-partisan, true believers.
The people living deep in the stable extremes of Canada and the Gulf of Mexico.
Precisely. Now, imagine a hypothetical incumbent who has spent their career navigating Tornado Alley. They have compromised. They have diagnosed errors on both sides. They built this nuanced centrist voting record.
They did what we theoretically want politicians to do.
Right. But when primary season arrives, they are uniquely vulnerable. Because a challenger from the extreme flank of their own party will attack them not for their policy outcomes, but for their lack of tribal purity.
And because only the true believers are voting.
The modern incumbent is ousted.
Wow.
The primary system acts as an impenetrable filtration mechanism. It actively hunts down and eliminates candidates who demonstrate centrist reasoning or a willingness to compromise before the general public ever gets a chance to vote for them in November.
It's an ideological purity test.
And navigating the center guarantees failure in that test. By the time the genuine independent voter arrives at the ballot box in the general election, their choices have already been rigidly constrained to the polls.
That perfectly transitions into the third pillar, structural incentives.
Yeah, the math itself.
The analysis concludes that every single structural incentive in the framework pushes outward toward the extremes.
We can look at a concept like Duverger's law in political science to see this in action.
Okay, what is that?
It states that single ballot, plurality rule elections.
Which is a fancy way of saying what?
First past the post,
Right.
where whoever gets the most votes wins, even if it's not a majority.
Got it.
Well, Duverger's law says that this specific mathematical structure mathematically ensures a two-party system.
Because voters quickly realize that voting for a third-party centrist candidate might actually siphon votes away from the major party candidate they tolerate,
Right.
inadvertently helping the major party candidate they despise.
It's the classic spoiler effect.
Right.
The structure of the voting mechanism itself forces the voter to abandon the center and seek the safety of the major factions.
Because they're voting against their worst fear, not for what they actually want.
Exactly. And when you combine first past the post voting with heavily gerrymandered districts, where the only real threat to an incumbent is from a primary challenger on their flank, you create an architecture that strictly forbids moderation.
What is so chilling about synthesizing all of this is the realization that the hostility of the center isn't an accident.
Not at all.
It isn't a glitch in the matrix. The system is functioning flawlessly, exactly as it was designed to function by the entities that constructed
To
it.
protect themselves.
The two dominant factions have built a fortress that protects their duopoly by making the middle ground entirely uninhabitable.
Every single incentive, the financial models of the media, the gatekeeping of primary elections, the mathematics of the voting system itself, all of it rewards abandoning the center.
Let's bring the entire journey of this analysis into focus here.
Yeah, let's recap.
We started by tearing down a deeply held myth, the psychological comfort of the Quiet Valley. the illusion that you can be an objective referee standing safely on the sidelines.
And we observed how the simple act of diagnosing errors transforms the independent into a universal target, reviled by factions that demand absolute loyalty.
We looked at the physical fluid dynamics of the Drake Passage.
The ocean's crashing.
Right. Watching massive opposing oceans collide to create a localized zone of pure, vibrating chaos. We analyzed the connective tissue of the Middle East, realizing that being the bridge guarantees you will be the battlefield.
It's unavoidable.
We stood in the boundary layer of Tornado Alley, recognizing that the friction of extreme political ideologies doesn't create equilibrium. It generates the violent rotational energy that tears our discourse apart.
And then we broke down the structural architecture, the media algorithms, the primary filtration systems, the voting mechanics, the machine that actively hunts and eliminates centrist reasoning.
The final thesis of the analysis completely redefines our vocabulary. The middle isn't moderate.
Yeah.
It isn't mild or safe or wishy-washy. It is the site of maximum pressure. The genuine independent isn't sitting in the bleachers eating popcorn while the extremes fight.
They're standing right in the forge.
Exactly. They're standing directly in the forge, absorbing the highest pressures our political geography has to offer, forcing ideas to either harden or shatter.
And the concept of that forge leaves us with a really profound mechanical reality to consider at the end of all this.
What is that?
Well, if we extrapolate strictly from the physics the analysis lays out, the extreme environments, the deep cold of the north and the deep heat of the south, are entirely static.
Right, because everyone agrees with each other.
Nothing changes inside an ideological bubble because nothing is ever challenged. The rules are set, the environment is closed.
So the center is the only place where these opposing forces actually interact.
Exactly. The center is the only boundary layer where collision occurs. It is the only place where pressure reaches the threshold required for transformation.
Wow.
If ideas only harden or shatter in the middle, then we are forced to ask a very uncomfortable question.
Lay it on us.
Is it possible that this violent, structurally hostile, incredibly dangerous middle is the only place where genuine political evolution can actually occur?
Because it's the only place with enough heat and pressure to make something new.
Precisely. If the extremes are incapable of generating anything but static conformity, does discovering a new solution actually require stepping out of the bleachers, abandoning the psychological safety of the tribe, and willingly walking directly into the storm?
That is an incredible thought to end on. You cannot achieve transformation without surviving the collision. If you're listening, think about where you stand on that map and whether you are prepared for the weather. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the structures, keep watching the boundary layers, and keep exploring the cross currents.